There were some presidential candidates that were in South Carolina over the weekend at Benedict College. So President Trump was here as well, greeted with a lot of protesters. Greeted with a lot of protesters. Not happy about President Trump visiting this state, and not just this state, but Benedict College.
Historically black college.
Right. But that's not really where we're going here. Bernie Sanders was in attendance as well. So Bernie Sanders was asked a question about, I guess the broad subject was criminal justice reform.
My question is to, my name is Jamel Lawton. I'm from Bamberg, South Carolina. I'm a sports management major. My question is to you, if I was your son, what advice would you give me the next time I pull over by a police officer?
Hold up, Mike, a little bit closer.
I'm sorry. If I'm your son, what advice would you give me the next time I be pulled over by a police officer?
Next time you pulled over by a police officer. I would do my best to identify who that police officer is in a polite way, ask him or her for their name. I would respect what they are doing so that you don't get shot in the back of the head. But I would also be very mindful of the fact that as a nation, we have got to hold police officers accountable for the actions that they commit. And that is, so to answer your question, I would be very cautious if you were my son in terms of dealing with that police officer, but I would also defend my rights and know my rights and make sure, if possible, that police officer's camera is on what goes on.
Based on the question he was asked, I'm trying to figure out whether there's anything wrong with that. I know there's a lot of people who did.
Well, see, let's set that up. So, given his answer, Bernie Sanders' answer, there was a lot of pushback, primarily from black people on social media.
Black people who support another candidate.
Okay, that's more specific. It's right, but still, it's a little bit more specific. But yes, there was a lot of pushback on Bernie Sanders' words. One, and we can talk about Michael Harriot, who writes for The Root. He said on Twitter, meanwhile, Bernie Sanders is out Che, literally telling black kids that treating cops respectfully will keep them from being shot in the head. Philando Castile would beg to differ.
That's an interesting interpretation of what Bernie had to say. I'd say interesting as a nicer way of saying intellectually lazy and intellectually disingenuous. I respect Michael Harriot. I really do. I actually follow him on Twitter, and I follow him on The Root, and I pay attention to what he writes. He's a very informative and witty writer too. He doesn't just he provides a lot of wit when he writes, but it's not unnecessarily. He knows how to fit it in. Very smart dude, very smart brother, whatever. Consistently, but here he is being very disingenuous. I know. I'm pretty sure he knows what the word literally means. And so he's applying the word literally, right, in this situation, and it doesn't apply. Because Bernie Sanders, no matter how you interpret what Bernie Sanders said, there's no way you could kind of calculate that that's what he meant. You know, like, obey the police and be nice and be respectful. And that's how we deal with, policemen not shooting black young males in the head. Like,
see,
come on.
That's not all that Bernie Sanders said. And I can understand how, if that was the solution, if that was presented as the solution to end police brutality and unarmed black people being shot by police, if that was presented as the solution, that would be a horrible take. That would be tone deaf as hell. That's not what I got from what Bernie Sanders said. Now, he did talk about respect what the police officers are doing so that, you don't get shot. From me, and see, I'm not coming from a place to where I feel like Bernie Sanders has ulterior motives, or like Bernie Sanders doesn't is not interested in the well-being or the success or raising the standard of living of everybody in the country, no matter where they come from or what they look like. So I'm not in some kind of toxic field where I'm putting that on Bernie Sanders. So when I hear him talk about, respect what the cop is doing so that you don't get shot, I'm feeling as though that's advice that a lot of parents would give to their children. So I have children as well. Of course, they're not driving age or anything like that. They're not at the age where they would walk out by themselves and just be around by themselves and their friends. But if I do have a son, I have a son. When my son and my daughter is out there by themselves,
I hope we don't see this, though.
when they're out there by themselves and driving, if they do get pulled over, my advice is not going to be like militant advice. My advice is not going to be like, hey, these bastards, these cops, they like to abuse their power and don't take no shit from these cops and this and that. No, see, the ultimate goal is to get your child home. You want your child to survive that interaction with the police officer, no matter how, insane and how abusive and disrespectful and inappropriate that police officer is being. You still want your child to be cautious in their dealings with the police officer, because the police officers carry mobile units of mass destruction. They can kill you. So you do want to be on alert when you're dealing with police officers.
So that's why I say respect what they're doing.
Yes.
Basically, look, what they have the authority to do.
Exactly.
So that doesn't mean, respect what they're doing doesn't mean, hey, what they're doing is right.
Yeah. And if you respect them, it will lead to you not
getting shot.
No, it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand, the question, right? Because you talked about yourself as a parent. Well, if you listen to the question made Bernie the parent. That is key in this. Bernie the parent in a hypothetical, or the hypothetical parent of a black son, in a hypothetical scenario. Now, in that hypothetical scenario, what advice would you give your son? You would not give your son policy advice.
No, you would not.
Policy reform isn't advice in that scenario. Safety is. He wasn't asked, how can society prevent shootings in general? That's not what he was asked.
You're a parent. What advice
That's not
do
what
you
he was
give
asked.
your
You're
son?
a parent. If he was just asked, hey, how can society prevent or lessen the amount of police shootings?
Yeah, you go into your policy.
Then you go into your policy. He was asked a question that put him in the position of being the parent.
So no matter, again, so as the parent, you have to, as difficult as it is, and as difficult a conversation would, that would be. And it is difficult knowing that these interactions with police officers can leave somebody dead. So that's very uncomfortable. It's maddening I haven't even been put in a situation, but just even seeing them time and time again, it is completely unacceptable. We all know that. But again, as a parent, you can't deal with the officer's actions because you're not in control of them. What you can try to influence is your child's actions. You can try to influence how they behave no matter what the cop is acting like. So that's where Bernie Sanders had to go. Again, was it like a perfect answer? I'm not sure what a perfect answer would have been in this situation, because a lot of answers given, from the perspective of a parent, the appropriate answer would go something like that. You would try to convey to your child, hey, look, be careful, be very cautious, and make sure that the body cam is turned on.
Identify the officer.
Respect what they're doing. You don't want to get shot. A lot of these things would be addressed if you're a parent of a young black male. So I'm not sure where is the grief being put on Bernie Sanders? Why are people having such a visceral reaction to what Bernie Sanders said?
Because they're taking the whole entire situation out of context. And so they're inserting their own context and ignoring the question. I think the initial question is the most important thing to look at. And the way the question was set up put Bernie Sanders in a position to be the parent, not a policy reformer. It's quite simple.
Right. So there was another candidate that fielded the same exact question, but this other candidate got, I guess he got celebrated. He got commended for his response to the question. So this other candidate is former Vice President Joe Biden. And so you'll hear how he responded to this.
If I were your daughter, what advice would you give me the next time I am stopped by the police?
If you were my daughter, you'd be a Caucasian girl and you wouldn't be pulled over. No. But here's the deal. What I'd tell you is that's what's wrong. That is what's wrong. There is institutional racism that still exists.
Wow, he couldn't even cosplay. He couldn't even play act in that situation, right? As the daughter of this young woman. Like that
well,
was
the parent of the
parent, the parent of this young woman. Like, okay, like acknowledges that there's institutional bias and racism, blah, blah, blah. But
that's a good soundbite.
That's a good soundbite, and that wasn't the question. And actually, going back to Bernie Sanders, he actually brought attention to that too.
Right, he did.
He brought attention to that, like in his answer.
But he also answered the question.
Yeah, he also answered the question. But
Joe didn't answer the question.
He gave credence to holding police officers accountable.
Right.
Which essentially is the thing to do if we want to try to prevent or lessen the amount of police shootings, hold police accountable. I don't understand what the problem with Bernie's answer was. Biden's answer was like a non-answer.
Biden's answer was, and again, not again, but the clip that you just saw was from Biden's own Twitter account. He made this into a campaign ad. So this was a good soundbite. This was a good moment for his campaign to sound like he understands the grievances. He understands the problems that are going on in the black community in relation to how they deal with police officers, their confrontation with police officers. Cool. It's good that you understand the grievance, like you understand the frustration. But somebody asked you a question about what advice would you give to your daughter in dealing with police, in their interactions with police. What advice would you give them? He didn't give an answer, but he celebrated for giving some answer about how he understands that there's problems. We all understand that there's problems. If you've been paying attention at all, we all understand that there are significant problems in interactions with police officers, especially when you're talking about people of color. So he's saying something that we already know, but yet he gets applause, and not just does he get applause from the crowd, but the Root. There's an article in the Root that is like, hey, this was the right answer. It wasn't the right answer because it didn't actually address the question. So you have to figure that something else is going on here.
Yeah, considering that one of probably the premier writers on the Root had something to say about Bernie Sanders. But I don't recall him saying anything about Joe Biden. I don't recall a lot of these individuals that have a large Twitter following that had something to say about Bernie Sanders' answer. I didn't see any of them say anything about Biden's answer.
No, I didn't hear anything.
I've seen it go further than just Bernie Sanders says respect police and you won't get shot in the back of the head. It's transitioned and it's like morphed into Bernie Sanders says be obedient. Be obedient and you won't get shot in the back.
And everything will be okay.
And everything will be okay. I was like, you just got to be just totally ignoring everything, all the other things he said. And he did say, know your rights, defend your rights, and make sure the police officer's camera is on. Bottom line, many police are racist and they will shoot black and brown folks for no authentic reason. We need to change our entire justice system. The onus is not on the son.
So you would have to completely disregard all of that.
The onus is not on the son. I think he recognized like I'm not going to shit on your question. I'm going to answer your question, but I don't think that's enough because me in the position of a parent is not going to address the issue. All I'm going to say is get home safe. So he goes into a fairly comprehensive answer. The onus is not on the son. I think that's the important part.
And again, as a parent, what would you tell your kid? Anybody. Any parent that has, say any parent that has a kid, any parent that is talking to their kid about their dealings with a police officer, knowing what goes on currently, especially people of color, you're going to want your kid to be extremely cautious because you don't care. Look, the farthest thing from your mind in that interaction is, I guess, the kid proving to the cop that he's wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not what your concern is. Your concern is your kid making their way home. We can deal, if something inappropriate happened, we can deal with that. But I want you alive to deal with it with you. I don't want you dead. It doesn't mean that by respecting what the officer is doing, by being cautious about what you're doing, it doesn't mean that that will ensure that nothing bad happens, that kid is not shot and killed by a police officer. It doesn't ensure that whatsoever. But that's the advice you would give your kid, because I think that lessens the chances that something does go awry.
I mean, what were people expecting him to say? Now, I want you to look that cop in the face and say, look here, you pussy pig. You see what I'm saying?
Exactly. Be militant. Oh, yeah. Nobody would give that advice to their son. Nobody would give that advice to their daughter, because you would think that that would put them in harm's way more.
If I was a donut, you wouldn't be treating me like this. You know, like what are people expecting?